Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe, addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
Welcome to our program. Some months ago, at the time we were taping this program, there was a very violent put-down of wonderful people in Burma, which, or I call it Burma, the military dictatorship has changed that. And the Buddhists are a very nonviolent people, and a number of the monks were killed, and we thought it would be a very appropriate subject to talk this week and next week about a discussion of what is Buddhism, coming out of the stories that we've heard about what's happened to some of the wonderful people in Burma by this military dictatorship. And we have a very informed guest today that can discuss that, and again next week. I welcome to the program my colleague, Tom Flint. He's been on the faculty at North Idaho College in the Department of Philosophy since 1972. In addition to a professor in philosophy, he also teaches religion such as world religion. And our guest has a BA degree from Colorado State University in philosophy and a master's in the same field from the same institution. Tom, welcome to the program. We look forward to this important discussion. And I'm very pleased to have our two regular panelists. First of all is Janelle Burke, and next to her is Erna Reinhardt, and we'll ask Janelle to commit today's questioning.
Thank you, Tony, and welcome to the program, Tom. It's a pleasure to talk with you again about these important things. Can you tell us what is Buddhism, and with an emphasis on what is the foundation of Buddhism? How did it come about?
Okay. It's kind of a big topic, of course, and difficult to know exactly how to get into it, but it's primarily a religion that doesn't have a very strong emphasis on worship of God. The Buddha was sort of on a different page and was more concerned with the condition of people here on planet Earth in the here and now. And he was born as a prince in northern India, actually modern-day Nepal, the son of a king of a relatively small kingdom, and was raised kind of in the lap of luxury there. And at that time, traditional Hindu, or classical Hinduism as it existed in those days, had somewhat degenerated and was somewhat corrupt. The Hindu Brahmin caste performed all kinds of religious activities and ceremonies and rituals on behalf of families and individuals in the community. And the actual people themselves weren't really able to pursue much in the way of a spiritual life themselves. They were kind of bystanders. So the Buddha was isolated in this kind of castle that his father had intended him to be protected from any sort of outside influences that might make him go in a spiritual direction instead of following his duty as one of the nobility to take over the reins of the kingdom. But the Buddha was curious about what was going on out there in the world, and he sort of snuck out 4 times. This is known as the 4 passing sights. And first of all, he saw a sick person, a very diseased person, and then he saw an old person, and the 3rd time he went out, he saw a dead body, and he'd never seen any of these things before, and he was horrified by all of this, that these were things that actually happened to people. And then his final trip out, he saw a Hindu holy man who seemed to be content, even though he was very old and decrepit, sort of satisfied and content with the circumstances of his life. And the Buddha didn't understand how anybody could be easy with the reality of sickness, old age, and death. So he decided to abandon his wife and young child and go out into the wilderness, really, to go on a spiritual quest to try to understand the nature of life and how someone could come to terms with the reality of sickness, old age, and death. And he was about 29 when he left, and he was engaged in this process for about 6 years. And he studied with Hindu teachers and got as far as he thought he could go with them, but never was satisfied with the answers that he was getting from that direction. And so he then tried asceticism, very severe denial of the body, especially fasting, living in the elements and so forth. And he nearly starved to death and was collapsed in the road one day, and a young woman came up and offered him some food, and he decided to accept it. He wasn't getting the answers that he was seeking from that either, from the ascetic path, and so decided that he would take what nourishment he needed to have strength to carry on with his quest, and vowed to go sit under this tree that was nearby until he got the answer to his question. And the answer that he came up with, ultimately, after, well, stories vary about whether it was a week or 6 weeks, but under a full moon, he had this full enlightenment experience. His name wasn't the Buddha. He wasn't Bob Buddha. His actual name was Siddhartha Gautama from the Shakya clan. The Buddha means awakened one or enlightened one, and so it was an honorific that was given to him later in his life. And he decided that if he was able to achieve this kind of an experience, that he would devote himself for the rest of his life to a kind of a teaching mission to try to help others come to terms with the reality of suffering, sickness, old age, death, and so forth. And so he embarked on a 45-year teaching career, traveling around northern India, and in the rainy season, in the dry season, he kind of wandered around with an entourage, giving talks and teachings to different communities throughout the area. And then in the rainy season, they would kind of hole up and for about 3 or 4 months, and have sort of sustained meditation practice and so forth. And this was the development of the monastic tradition, which represents one of the main areas that Buddhism developed with.
Buddhism has become a more of a popular religion in the Western part of the world. So share with us your thoughts, Tom, about the religion today and how it has really gotten more appealing to people, and there are definitely more people that are practicing Buddhism.
Okay. Well, I think probably the best way to answer that is to mention the first 3 of what's known as the Four Noble Truths of Buddhist teaching, which is basically the heart of the religion. And it was the first sermon that he gave, and he emphasized the fundamental reality of human existence was what he called suffering, or dukkha. Now, in English, suffering has connotations of being sort of great misery and pain, but it's more subtle than that. It has to do with anxiety, disappointment, dis-ease, if you break the word disease into its roots, dissatisfaction, boredom, frustration, irritation, all those little kinds of things that make us unhappy. And that the cause of that was our kind of attachment and desire for the constantly changing things of the material world, which are always in flux. And when you try to cling on to something, you can't hold on to it because it ultimately changes. And then that leads to disappointment and so forth. And then the third of the Noble Truths is kind of a basic cause and effect analysis of the problem, that if suffering is the effect and desire or attachment to the world is the cause, then if you can cease desiring, cessation of desire leads to cessation of suffering. In other words, if you eliminate the cause, you eliminate the effect. Now, I think the way this connects with people in today's world is that everything is changing so fast, and everything is so complex, and our lives are so busy that were, pretty constantly kind of stressed out. And then I think there's also the sense in which, at least for some people, traditional established religions are not providing people, at least some people, with the kinds of answers and directions that they want to take. So Buddhism seems to have appeal for people to kind of help them come to terms with the way their own mind works and how to relate their own mind to the phenomena that are going on around the world. And because it is very much grounded in our ordinary everyday experience, it provides, tools and techniques for people to understand and work with their own mind and gradually learn how to deal with their responses to the world in ways that aren't distressful to them.
You also indicated there are Four Noble Truths, and I believe in your discussion you dealt with the first three. What would the other one be?
The fourth Noble Truth is known as the Eightfold Noble Path. So on the one hand, the Buddha had an analysis of the human condition, and then on the other hand, he had a formula for how people could work with that. And there's quite a bit to the Eightfold Path. The first, and they're not sequential steps either. They're just components that you work on simultaneously all the time. And first of all, there's right knowledge, which is knowing about the human condition and the Four Noble Truths and other fundamental basic Buddhist teachings like impermanence and so forth. And then there's right aspiration or right motivation, where one makes a commitment to work with one's own mind and to try to follow the teachings of the Buddha. Then there's also right speech. Buddhism makes an interesting observation that where mind and body intersect is with speech. Speech is a physical action, of course, but it has a mental content. And the idea is that we can gradually learn to come to terms with the mental content of speech if we can learn how to restrain speech itself. So you learn to study your speech patterns and the kind of thoughts that are going with that, anger, jealousy, envy, all those kinds of things that where we vocalize and express that. And it's easier to stop speaking and kind of hold it back and think about what you're going to say before you say it than stopping the thoughts. That kind of comes later. So right speech is avoiding harsh or harmful speech that would hurt other people, gossiping, things like that. And then there's right action, which is essentially the Buddhist moral code, not really too much different from the Judeo-Christian Mosaic code of the moral aspects of the Ten Commandments. And so you don't kill anything. And that's extended beyond just human beings. You also are not supposed to kill any sentient being if you can avoid it. So harmlessness, ahimsa, not killing or harming sentient beings would apply to animals and birds and fish and so on and so forth. I don't know how far you can. Some people would, carry it to extremes and, walk wide circle around an ant, but nevertheless, at some point, animals feel pain, experience their lives, and so forth. Don't steal or take that which is not given to you. Not lying or engaging in false speech, harmful speech, sort of re-emphasizing the right speech aspect that I already mentioned. Avoiding intoxicants so as to not cloud and delude the mind. We already live in a kind of a delusion, and if you get intoxicated, that's just a distraction, and sort of compounds the delusion that you're living in. And then let's see, fifth would be not to misuse sexual behavior. So those five, not killing, not stealing, not lying, misusing sex or indulging in intoxicants would be things that all Buddhists, householders, lay people, as well as monks, would adhere to. There are 5 more for novice monks. Not in adorning the body, which promotes vanity, not indulging in entertainments like theater and music and drama and various kinds of recreation things. Again, these are distracting from the program of meditation that the Buddha sets up, which are some of the later parts of the Eightfold Noble Path. Not sleeping or laying around in soft beds, not eating after the noon meal. In a monastery, you have a morning meal and a midday meal, and then after that you might have some tea in the evening, but you wouldn't eat again until the next morning, which sort of energizes the meditation practice. And then finally not handling money, gold and silver specifically, but money is very distracting as well. And then for an initiated monk, there would be another over 200 different rules that structure up every aspect of daily life. So the moral code is fairly general for ordinary householder people, and then it gets rather strenuous and vigorous and rigorous for people in the monastic setting. Let's see, in addition to right action, there would also be right livelihood. You shouldn't engage in a form of work or activity where you're earning a living that violates any of the 5 precepts, the first 5 of the moral code. And basically you don't want to engage in any activity that harms people in order to earn a living. So, I mean, working in the arms business or the sex industry, or I suppose being a bartender, all of those things would sort of be out of bounds for Buddhists. Also, right effort. Doing all of these creates or demands a fair amount of effort in order to sustain steady progress in these. And then the last 2 are probably the keys to being able to do all of it, which are right mindfulness and right concentration or meditation. Right mindfulness is, I guess it was Ram Dass who said, "Stop thoughts and be here now." It's the idea of being fully present in the moment, so that we're fully aware of what we're doing and what we're experiencing, and not daydreaming or having an internal dialogue with ourselves about what just happened this morning or last week, and then not, dwelling too much on what's going to happen in the future. We tend to miss the moment because we distract ourselves with sort of random mental chatter. So the idea is to try to stay focused in the present moment and be fully aware of all of the experience that's going on around you. And then finally, right concentration or meditation is learning how to focus your mind in a very sharp and precise kind of way. And that helps with the mindfulness, so that when you're doing something, you're fully concentrated on doing that. And multitasking is probably something that Buddhism would somewhat discourage. And I think the contemporary research has shown also that the more things you're trying to do at once, the less well you do any of them. So anyway, that's the program, and if you can stay with it and do it, it gradually kind of transforms the way you behave in the world and respond to the world.
Well, you have joined us in progress. Our topic today is a discussion of Buddhism, and we'll turn back to Janelle Burke.
Not all Buddhists are the same. There are some divisions within Buddhism. Can you explain the major divisions within Buddhism?
Sure. The oldest form of Buddhism is called Theravada. And it's hard to know exactly what the Buddha taught in any detail, because it was essentially an oral tradition for a long while. But this school is known as the School of the Elders, and it's probably the closest form of Buddhism that was established by the Buddha himself. It's primarily a monastic approach to practice where people essentially give up the world, surrender their lives to a very highly structured monastic environment with the hope that through study of sacred texts and meditation practice, they will be able to make this transformation of consciousness into this enlightened mind or sort of transcendental consciousness that Buddhism ultimately aims at. And then for lay people who are not willing to make that degree of a commitment, they achieve kind of karmic merit, good karmic merit, by supporting the monastic community. Traditionally, the monks would beg for food. They would be provided by the community with clothing and bedding and the various things that they need and so forth. And then by, being generous and compassionate toward the monks who are sort of like the spiritual athletes of the community, so to speak, then you would help develop a reservoir of good karma, which would then result in a better rebirth, so that in a future life you might then be able to make that stronger commitment to achieving enlightenment in this lifetime. This form of Buddhism traveled primarily south through southern India, largely through the influence of a great Indian emperor named Ashoka in the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC. He unified